Okay, ready to go? Are you ready, Mr. Speaker?
Sure.
All right, thank you. Well, Mr. Speaker, thanks so much for talking to us. We really appreciate it. Welcome to North Carolina here.
It's great to be back.
I want to ask you about the Billy Graham Library. You were next door here and had a chance to walk around there and visit there. What did you think?
It's remarkable. His lifespan is remarkable. The service to God is remarkable. The crowd responses around the world is remarkable. And they have done a tremendous job. I mean, Clifton and I have been to many presidential libraries, and this is in the same league of you just learn stuff in every single room. And his life has been such a compelling witness for Christ that it's a very powerful experience to go there.
How much does a campaign test your faith?
Oh, I think life tests your faith. I think everybody who's watching this will tell you that you don't have to be a candidate to have your faith tested. But campaigns probably have a different intensity sometimes of testing your faith.
How much have you been asked about your faith, and how much do you believe faith should play a role in a presidential campaign?
I think it's important to know whether or not somebody has faith, and without getting into a particular denomination. I do think if somebody tells you that they're so self-reliant that they don't need to pray, that they don't, or even more, that they don't believe in prayer, I think that tells you a lot. I'd be very cautious about loaning power to somebody who had no sense that they were subordinate to God.
I want to ask you about some of the reports that have come out over the past 24 hours which suggest that these may be the final hours or final days of your presidential campaign. Are you planning to stay in this, or are you thinking?
These reports somehow get exaggerated and have been ever since June of last year. I am the last conservative standing. I said in June of last year I'd still be here. We're in North Carolina. We have 23 events this week. We're going to campaign everywhere. But what I did say was we're going to evaluate accurately and honestly what's happening tonight. You've got events in New York, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Delaware. You'd have to be pretty foolish not to want to pay some attention to them. But I do think people need to draw a distinction between Romney as front runner, which he is, and Romney as inevitable, which he may not be. And I think it's very dangerous for Governor Romney and his campaign to assume that he's the nominee. It sort of shows no respect for the voters of North Carolina, West Virginia, Indiana, or for that matter today. I mean, he's off making his first, quote, general election speech while voters in 5 states are voting in primaries. I think that's, for a guy who's only halfway to the nomination, if you count the number of votes he has, he's about halfway to the nomination. I think that's a little presumptuous.
You think it sends the wrong message to those states?
I think it sends the wrong message to the voters. I mean, it's a message that says the voters don't matter. Well, I think voters do matter. And we're going to be campaigning all across North Carolina because we believe voters matter. And I think it's very important for the voters to be the people who decide, not the news media and not the campaign consultants.
So depending on what happens tonight, will you continue those events in North Carolina?
Our expectation is, oh yeah, under any circumstance, we're going to be at every single event we've outlined this week. And our expectation is we'll continue to campaign until Romney gets to 1,144 delegates. I've always said if he earns 1,144, he has earned the nomination. But no one has an obligation to give it to him.
When you talk about reflecting or reassessing your campaign here,
well, I think we want to see what the results are tonight. I mean, and what has happened in the various states and what that tells us about how to move forward and what to emphasize moving forward. But my sense from people all over the country who, much like the people at the Billy Graham Library who walked up to Clifton and me and said, please stay in. You're in our prayers. We're with you. And I think you'll see people tonight at our event who are going to be very committed to moving forward into campaigning here in North Carolina. What is establishing a debt repayment fund so that royalties for natural gas and oil would go to pay down the national debt? I think I tend to bring more big solutions than traditional candidates do.
So without you in the race, if eventually you do step out of this race, what does the Republican Party lose?
I think they lose both a solid commitment to conservatism, and I think they lose an entire range of new solutions that are necessary if we're going to solve the problems we got. We're a country with very substantial problems, surrounded by other industrial democracies who have very substantial problems. And there aren't very many politicians trying to come up with solutions. There are a number of politicians trying to avoid reality, and there are a number of politicians who offer pain in a form that's not going to be sustainable. I mean, people are not going to voluntarily vote to destroy their standard of living.
Do you believe that Mitt Romney has the skills that are necessary to become president?
I think he may well. We'll find out. But look, Barack Obama had the skills necessary to become president. He's a disaster. The question is, what are his plans? What are his commitments? What are his values? Does he have a vision which would lead America to a successful future?
You're a very different person from Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney was supposed to sit down with me. He canceled all North Carolina interviews. I should mention that you came in here. There were no ground rules for talking to me. You're willing to answer any question I ask. What do you think that says about Mitt Romney, that he is unwilling to come into North Carolina and speak openly to the media in one-on-one interviews?
All I can tell you is it's part of the reason I'm still in the race. I think having somebody who's not afraid and having somebody who's willing to talk with you or to talk with the voters is really important. You can't lead America through consultants.
Do you believe Mitt Romney is conservative enough to be electable?
I believe compared to Barack Obama, he's conservative enough.
Is he conservative enough for the party to rally around him?
Compared to Barack Obama, he's conservative enough.
Yeah.
Look, no rational conservative is going to sit on their hands if that means Barack Obama gets reelected. I mean, that would be an act of suicide for the conservative movement. Barack Obama getting 4 more years to appoint judges, just by itself, is a disaster. Forget everything else.
Part of our coverage area is South Carolina, the northern part of South Carolina. You did very well
We sure did.
there.
And we would hope to do well here by the time we get to the primary.
I want to ask you about, as you moved forward out of South Carolina, first of all, what did that victory mean to you?
Well, it was the second time that we had rebounded. Remember, we were supposed to be dead in June. By December, we were in first place by a big margin. We got hit by $6 million of Wall Street money on the Romney campaign in Iowa. People thought we were dead in New Hampshire. We bounced back in South Carolina. By the week after South Carolina, we were ahead by 7 to 9 points nationally. We then got hit with $21, $22 million of Wall Street money. That's what happened in Florida. I mean, Florida's not complicated. We were drowned in mud. We've gradually recovered. And as I said, Pawlenty's gone, Bachmann's gone, Kane's gone, Perry's gone, and Santorum's gone. We're still here.
Mitt Romney's Political Action Committee has spent enormous amounts of money to try to undermine your candidacy. Is it difficult for you to like the person, Mitt Romney, when you see what he did to your campaign?
It's irrelevant.
In what way? Why is that irrelevant?
Because the alternative is, if Romney becomes the nominee, the alternative is Barack Obama. Would
you call that the lesser of two evils?
No, I would say that there's an enormous difference between Mitt Romney and Barack Obama. And faced with those two choices, I think that anybody who is a conservative and who believes in conservative values would have no choice except to do everything he could, or she could, to help Mitt Romney. I don't have, again, this is about the reality of the presidency. I don't approve of the campaign they ran. I don't think it was good for the country to run those negative ads. I think the whole system's got to be redesigned. We would be so much healthier if you could give unlimited after-tax money to candidates, report it every night on the internet, and have the candidate responsible for their campaign.
Have you met with Mitt Romney recently, talked
Sure.
about, and can you share at all what you talked about?
No. We chat about how do we beat Barack Obama.
Huh.
And I think he would tell you, if to his great shock I became the nominee, he would do everything he could to beat Obama. And I'll tell you, if he gets to be the nominee, I'll do everything I can to beat Obama. So in that sense, we have a common interest.
Did he ask for your support?
No, we chatted. Look, we're competitors at this point. He knows my position. My position is he's got to get 1,144 delegates.
Rick Santorum today, it was said that Rick Santorum would not endorse Mitt Romney, at least as of today, was not endorsing Mitt Romney. Do you see yourself down the line doing that? If he is the eventual nominee?
Oh, sure. And I'm sure that when he gets to 1144, that Rick will probably endorse him too. But none of us who are conservatives have any obligation to accept the national media dictating that we should concede something that is mathematically untrue. He is the front runner. He's not inevitable. You look at what's happened recently in Colorado, Iowa, Minnesota, Louisiana, and he's a long way from being inevitable.
From a financial standpoint, this campaign is an expensive one. Mitt
Yes.
Romney has an enormous amount of
Yes.
money. There have been reports, and that you are your campaign is in debt, millions of dollars. Does that influence your interest in staying in this campaign?
No, just makes it harder. I mean, anybody who wants to go to newt.org, we've had 180,000 donors. We'd love to have another 180,000 donors. But I ran a campaign last summer on a very tiny amount of money because the elite media was so hostile. We can sustain this for a long time. That's partly because I'm willing to talk to you.
When you talk about sustaining it for a long time, can you see yourself being in this race for a long time?
If things break a certain way, I can see this race being amazingly different in 60 days.
How would they have to break?
The news media would have to suddenly realize that inevitability doesn't exist. And all of a sudden you'd have a totally different conversation.
So you would need to be presented in a different way, or you
Not
believe
just
a
me,
more accurate way?
No,
in the media?
but I think that happens. I think when I'm out campaigning and I have a chance to be with people, we do much, much better. And I think the question is there a circumstance where all of a sudden people reopen the question who the nominee is going to be? If that happens, then I think you're in a very different world.
I want to ask you about your wife's role in this campaign and the impact she's had on people. I know she's talking to kids about her book and other things, but what kind of impact do you think Mrs. Gingrich has had on this campaign?
Well, I think it was all captured in the Milwaukee Sentinel one day when we had the center of page one was a color picture of Callista surrounded by about 50 or 60 kids with Ellis the elephant in the background. And it said down below, Santorum, Gingrich, Romney, page 4, B. And I thought, that's communicating a concern for children, communicating a concern for education. She wrote Sweet Land of Liberty to get across American history for 4 to 8-year-olds. And I think that's all good. I think her interest in cancer and the places where she goes and visits cancer researchers is terrific. I think her interest in American history and the speeches she gives in American Exceptionalism, where we've done a movie, we've done books together, all of that seems to... She just came out of Rhode Island where she had several days of campaigning, and I think it helped us substantially.
Assuming that you are not the nominee, the Republican nominee, and not the next president of the United States, how do you want to be remembered in politics in this country? You've had
If I am not the
career.
nominee and I'm not the next president, I would like to be able to par Pinehurst number 2. I think that would be one of those lifetime moments that would be, would make it all worthwhile. My second goal in North Carolina, my daughter, by the way, my older daughter, went to Davidson, and she used to own a coffee company in Greensboro. And her husband was the head coach of the tennis team at UNCG.
Wow.
My second goal is to really get to know the zoo in Ashboro better, which I'm going to do this week. So I'm a person of very simple interest. My co-authors both live here in North Carolina. Bill Fortune lives in Montreat, and Steve Hanger lives in Asheville. And we write novels together, so I have many, many ties to North Carolina. And, I think in a different future, if I'm not president, I'll probably write some more historical novels.
You've got this, and speaking of writing and story things happening to you, the penguin encounter.
Yeah, penguin bite.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that something that you carry with pride?
Yeah, but I was down on my hands and knees playing with a penguin, and the keeper said they will bite, and he did. It was, look, I once had a picture, and this makes, I concede, this makes me different than traditional, stuffy, staged, consultant-driven politicians. I like interesting things. I mean, we went to the Air Force Museum in Dover the other day, and I was like a little kid. It was so fascinating. I once had a baby lion bite me right here when I was Speaker of the House. So I have a long history of liking to see animals, and whether they're in museums or they're in zoos or they're out in the wild. Cliss and I once spent 3 weeks in Africa.
Wow.
And she took 1,400 pictures.
Wow.
It was extraordinary.
Is there one animal that you think best would describe you?
Well, as a Republican candidate, you always have to say the elephant.
Sure.
This is why Ellis the elephant is so important.
There you go. Anything beyond an elephant?
Oh, I like all of them. I have fun with all of them.
When you go to this zoo, is there a particular animal? I've seen the pictures of you with all those animals that I think were tweeted out or on a website.
No,
the other
it's
day.
really, every zoo is unique. We were in a very tiny zoo in Wilmington. It's a beautiful small zoo. But they have the best Andean condor exhibit I've ever seen. That's the largest flying bird in the world. And I happened to walk in. They opened the zoo early in the morning for me. I happened to walk in while the male condor was up on the top of this hillside, and he'd stretched his wings. They stretched out like 16 or 18 feet. I mean, and I'm standing there looking up at this sight. Now, I wouldn't normally have said to you that condors overwhelm me, but seeing one with his wings that spread, you think, wow, that is a really remarkable bird. And so I think every place I go. Many years ago, I was at your zoo here at Ashboro, and the meerkats were being fed crickets, and I'd seen the Animal Channel series on the meerkats. So and watching them hunt was amazing. I mean, they had this whole colony running around chasing crickets, and it just happened to be a random day at the zoo here. And so I think everywhere I go, I kind of let. It's a lot like dealing with people. I try to let the zoo or the museum tell me what they do well. I don't try to walk in with expectation. Just as in my town hall meetings, I try to have people tell me what they're concerned about, not just automatically have a canned Newt Gingrich version of reality.
I'm struck by the campaign appearances you're making in North Carolina here, because you're going to a lot of rural areas. Do you believe you connect particularly well with rural voters?
Well, the data would seem to say I do. If you look in Florida, despite being drowned in money by Romney, we carried all of North Florida. And I think it's partly because in rural areas people talk to each other and they shrug off the TV ads. This is not true. And whereas in suburban areas it's harder to communicate. If you can't match the money in suburban areas, it's much harder. Although I will say, last year I spoke in Raleigh to the county Republican convention, and it was 1,200, 1,300 people. It was a huge event.
How would you view North Carolina in terms of importance in the presidential race? Well,
it saved Ronald Reagan in 1976. He had lost every primary coming to North Carolina, and he did a statewide 30-minute speech and turned his whole campaign around and got him within 70 votes of beating the incumbent president in the convention, and really set the stage for 1980. So North Carolina can be very, very important. You know, obviously I would love to see North Carolina decide to play that role this year.
Yeah. You believe you'll be around come May 8th in this campaign?
Yeah, I think the odds are better than even I'll be around on May 8th.
All right. Anything else you'd like to say that you think is important for people here in North Carolina to know about you?
No, just that I'm somebody who represents classic conservative values, and I'm somebody who really cares about bringing down the price of gasoline, creating energy independence, and creating millions of new American jobs.
Speaker Gingrich, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right.